Good evening, everybody. And these candidates here are vying for the next 5 positions on the Greater Wellington Regional Council, and they'll be answering these 30 boxes worth of questions over the next 2 hours. But with every election, there's one thing stepping in their way, and that's your vote. And good evening and welcome to It's in the Ballot here for the Poneke Wellington constituency of the Greater Wellington Regional Council. And put it this way, I think for all the incumbents who have come out tonight, I stood against them 3 years ago. I have decided tonight as being a conflict of interest. It was inappropriate if I'm going to host an election show to be a candidate as well. So that's the reason why I've gone for this. But I have to be honest, I'm enjoying it. And I'm pleased with the number of incumbents who have turned up tonight. We've got quite a good house of candidates. So I think when it comes to my recommendation of voting, you've got a lot of people worth voting for. Now, before we get to our candidates here, let's sit down there and we'll give a bit of a brief explanation of the constituency for Poneke Wellington.
Poneke Wellington constituency, Greater Wellington Regional Council. The Poneke Wellington Greater Wellington Regional Council constituency covers the most of the Wellington City Council boundary, but does exclude the suburb of Tawa. The main function of the Greater Wellington Regional Council is to be an environmental watchdog on local city and district councils across their catchment area. And in the case of Greater Wellington Regional Council, their bigger function is providing public transport. They control bus routes all over the region and have bus route numbers ranging from single-digit numbers in Wellington all the way up to triple-digit numbers on the Kapiti Coast and in the Wairarapa. Greater Wellington Regional Council also has 5 railway lines: the Johnsonville Line, the Kapiti Line, the Hutt Valley Line, the Melling Line and the Wairarapa Line, plus they also have some electric ferries travelling from Queen's Wharf to Days Bay. Now let's get to the important part, the voting system. The Greater Wellington Regional Council uses the voting system single transferable vote. And in Poneke Wellington, you'll be electing 5 councillors to the table. When voting, you rank your candidates in order of preference, starting with number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and so on. You can rank as many candidates as you want, or as few as you want.
Okay, so there's our electorate video explaining the ins and outs of where the voting constituencies are. And yes, if you're in Tawa, unfortunately you're not voting for these candidates, but if you're everywhere else in the Wellington City Council boundaries, you certainly can. Now we're going to sit there and start off with opening statements, and they're going to be 1 minute long, and we sit there and start off with Chris Calvi-Freeman. You're up first.
Good evening. It's always good to be up first. I'm Chris Calvi-Freeman. I'm a transport planner of old. I have had a lot of involvement with the Regional Council. I used to be the General Manager of New Zealand Railways representative on the Regional Transport Committee way back in the 80s, and then I was headhunted to join the Regional Council. I was their first public transport manager. In those days, we faced the deregulation of public transport under Rogernomics, and I led the small team that put together the bus service that served Wellington pretty well for 27 years, from 1991 through until 2018 when it was replaced by something called the bus-tastrophe. More about that later. Public transport and strategic roading, transport generally is my bag. I've worked in that industry overseas. I've worked on 2 Olympics, Sydney and London, both of which were renowned for their transport successes. I'm looking forward to bringing my skills and experience to bear to try and let's get Wellington moving, actually moving, and to make sure that our buses are performing as best as they possibly can. Thank you.
Not a problem. Next up, Yadana Saw.
Tēnā koutou katoa, he mihi ana ki te mana whenua, e mihi ana ki te you watching at home, e mihi ana to my fellow candidates. Kia ora, my name is Yadana Saw, and I'm running for Regional Council because it's the agency that is here for greater environmental good. My journey as an environmentalist began when I was 11 years old, and I was deeply concerned about the ozone layer, pollution and deforestation. I had no idea that several decades later, I'd be accompanying my children on the school strike for climate. So that's the reason why I'm running for Regional Council. It's the agency that looks after our land, air and water quality and our public transport. We have a huge amount of work to do to meet the challenges of climate change and to take climate action, which our incumbents here have taken some massive steps towards addressing our emissions reduction targets and a future that is zero carbon. And I really want to assist them in that and also meet the aspirations of mana whenua and the generations who are coming after us.
Okay, next up, Roger Blakeley.
Ko Roger Blakeley, ko toku inoa, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. So I'm a born and bred Wellingtonian. I live on the northern slopes of Mount Victoria, looking out on the beautiful Te Whanganui-a-Tara harbour. My career has been in the public service. So I've had roles of Chief Executive of Ministry for the Environment, which I set up in 1986. And led it right through the Resource Management Act development process. I then went to be the Chief Executive of the Department of Internal Affairs. And then I took a big step to local government and went to be the Chief Executive of Porirua City Council, which I loved. And then went to Auckland as the Chief Planning Officer of the new Super City Council in 2010 and led it through the formative stages of the Super City, which was a very exciting time. So then I came back to Wellington and I decided to get over the other side of the governance table, and I stood for election and got elected to the Regional Council and also to the Capital and Coast District Health Board. So I've now been in the Regional Council as an elected member for 2 terms, and I've loved being in the Regional Council. In the last term, I've been the chair of the Transport Committee, which has been a very exciting time. We've had a very can-do council and some very can-do officers, and we've achieved some great things in the transport area, which I'll be happy to talk about later on. And so I've put my hat in the ring again to have another go for another exciting 3 years. Thank you.
Okay, next up, Thomas Nash.
Oh, kia ora mai tātou, ngā mihi o te waki a tātou, tēnā rā koutou katoa. I'm Thomas Nash and I am running for Regional Council because I want to continue the work that I've been doing for the last 3 years as a councillor on climate, on restoring our natural environment, and on improving our public transport system. I'm running for re-election alongside Yadana Saw because I think it's important to recognise we can actually do quite a lot more than perhaps we are told we can do or we think we can do. If we have enough progressive voices around the decision-making table, then the scope of the decisions that we can make changes, and we get more opportunity to actually push the boat out. I've seen that happen. A lot of the things that people campaigned on last time were considered impossible. Bringing the airport bus back inside the public transport network, increasing drivers' wages substantially, and phasing out grazing on regional parkland. Those things were dismissed as maybe too hard, maybe you shouldn't even try, but we've done them all. And I know that if we get more progressive regional councillors elected around the table, we'll be able to do more things on climate, on nature, and on a really good public transport system. So yeah, I hope you'll consider your 1 and 2 votes for Yadana and me. Thank you.
Okay, next up now it's Chris Montgomery, is that correct? Just want to make sure I got it right, it's not spelt like Mr. Burns.
Yeah, no, that's correct, yeah. Kia ora koutou, ko Chris Montgomery tōku whenua. I'm standing for the Regional Council because I'm passionate about the environment and climate change, and I do want to make sure that we continue on climate action. I work in for the Environmental Education Association, and I'm hearing reading a lot about climate change, but I'm also seeing a lot of the grief and the anxiety and uncertainty that young people have for their future, which is fairly uncertain at this stage. So I really want to have a hand in making sure that it's a good one that we can pass on to our children and their children. My background's in communications. I've always worked in sort of sustainability and environmental kind of projects, I guess. But I do really feel as though we need people who will be uniting, like they will be keeping going on the right track, because I do believe that the Regional Council is on the right track. We need a bit more energy and momentum to keep going there, but we also can't be dividing our society and have people feeling disgruntled as we move in that direction. So I'm a collaborator and wanting to get, I'm the kind of person who wants to get as many people in agreement as possible. So I think that we can do that with good communication and discussion with the community. Kia ora.
Okay, next is Leigh. Is it Catley? Yep, Leigh Catley.
Kia ora. My name's Leig Catley. I'm a Wellington born and bred city resident. I am here because I think what the Regional Council does for Wellingtonians and for the region is incredibly important and not very well known. I have 6 years actually, of working with Federated Farmers and as their head of communications. Before that, I worked with Horticulture New Zealand, 10 years in communications. Early on, I was a journalist. I'm clear on what it is that the community has to do to deal with things like climate change. And I know how much is going on in some parts of our community. The reason I'm sitting here now is because I'm really worried about the fact that I don't think urban Wellingtonians feel comfortable with climate change adaptation and resilience. And I want to know what the Regional Council can do to help with that, to make people feel more secure with some of the things we're going to have to deal with in the not too distant future. More slips, flooding, drought, fire. What can the Regional Council do to help urban residents feel safer and more secure and help us get through what we've got to get through and what we need to deal with in the next, at least the next couple of decades?
Okay, coming in remotely, David Leigh.
Yes, kia ora tātou. I'm an urban planner, certified RMA commissioner. I have 20 years of experience in central and local government. So I kind of know the mechanics of government, and more importantly, I know how to get stuff done. I've served, just as a bit of background, I've served 2 terms as a Wellington City Councillor. I had probably the coolest portfolios, which was climate change, technology, innovation and enterprise. And in my 6 years, we achieved a lot of firsts for not just Wellington, but for New Zealand. We had the highest number of solar PVs in schools, a partnership between the schools, Genesis and Wellington City. And we rolled out, I think, about 17 on-street charging stations for EVs. And we retired and registered the most land for carbon sequestration. And we were rated the greenest city in Australasia. But since leaving, Wellington has slipped down to second in behind Auckland. From a technology angle, we worked with Wellington NZ, and we rolled out the Look-See program, which was the global tech recruitment drive for technology. And that was, I think the Guardian said it, that was the most successful recruitment drive ever, because it attracted 28,000 applicants for 100 jobs. So currently I'm a first term GW councillor. I'm very privileged to be the Deputy Chair of Transport, and it would be safe to say that we have actually achieved more in the last 2 or 2.5 years than the previous 20 years. Some of those things include on-demand trial for Tawa, and I can see that being rolled out across the Wellington region. We've improved the wages and conditions of our drivers. We've looked at we've rolled out Snapper on rail, and that's going to roll out to some of the other areas in November. And the real biggie is the electrification of our bus fleet. We are now the highest EV bus fleet in the Southern Hemisphere. Improving accessibility is going to be a big focus. And we're also looking at a big shake-up of our fares, and that's making them simpler, affordable, and equitable. I'm a bit of an infrastructure nerd, so I've got a good track record in project management of multi-million-dollar infrastructure projects, everything from sewage treatment plants to runway extensions to roading projects and large-scale environmental remediation work. One of the things I can claim for myself for Greater Wellington is I secured about 345,000 carbon credits. Back then it wasn't worth much, but now Greater Wellington has an asset of about $30 million going on today's spot price. So a lot of our climate change work is based on the borrowings against that asset. So if I'm re-elected, this will be I'm seeking re-election for a second term, and second and last, because I believe in just 2 terms. So no big promises, just finishing what we have started, especially in the transport and the water area. Kia ora.
Thank you, David. Next up, Thomas Bryan. And just slightly towards your... Yep, perfect.
And kia ora, and thank you very much. My name is Thomas Bryan, and I live in Lyall Bay and lived in Wellington probably for about 30 years. My background, well, I've worked in the area of technology, innovation, emerging technology. I've also served on a number of committees with Wellington City Council, with their Accessibility Advisory Group, and with Greater Wellington when they had an Accessibility Advisory Group. My passions and beliefs really are we need to make Wellington a better region from both the environment perspective and from getting around our city. Greater Wellington has done some terrific work around accessibility with its Access Charter, which it launched last year, but that's just the starting point, and we need to do more to make our transport, our network, from planning the journey right through to getting off and getting to the destination more accessible and usable for everybody. 25% of New Zealanders have a disability, and for many, public transport is the only way they get around the city. And if it's not accessible, then we're leaving those people behind. So I want to see an improvement around our accessibility of transport, but also we need to do more around the environment. And I think there's been some great work that's taken place with the electric buses and such like, but we need to do more to make our city a more livable, greenable city for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And we do have both apologies from Daran Ponter and Glenda Hughes. Daran has a meeting scheduling conflict, and Glenda has had a personal emergency she's had to attend to. Got that this morning. We also have had no response from Simon Wolf and from Jake Arthur. Now, Daran has prepared an opening video for the show, so we will play that. Thank you, Daran, for making the effort for doing it.
Good evening. My name's Daran Ponter. I'm the current chair of the Greater Wellington Regional Council, and I'm standing again for Poneke, Wellington constituency. Electric buses, lifting driver wages, lowering bus fares, new bus services, including the airport service, introducing Snapper onto rail, replanting our regional parks, restoring our wetlands, cleaning up our waterways have been key areas of focus during my current term as chair of the Greater Wellington Regional Council. Going forward, my priorities are more reliable Metlink services, reducing fares for buses and trains, more buses to more places, full integrated ticketing, and removing pollution in our urban streams and waterways. I'm committed to active community engagement, spades in the ground on major transport projects, a vibrant downtown Wellington, and supporting economic development. Climate change, water quality, and infrastructure resilience are key priorities as well. I'm an experienced regional councillor with a strong background in problem solving, I have a track record of bringing people together and delivering for Wellington. I have a background in resource management and public policy, and I look forward to your support and leading the Regional Council in another successful term. Kia ora.
Okay, so we're back here. Thank you, Daran, for doing that pre-recorded opening statement. Not every candidate who's been able to make it has gone to the lengths that you have to sit there and make this work. And thank you for going out of the way also to sit there and help doing it, because you know some of the stuff that happened in the background for the show to go ahead. Okay, we're going to take a quick break now, so I can move myself to the other end of our stage, and we'll kick off for our ballot box questions. Okay, and welcome back to It's in the Ballot, and we've got the ballot boxes here. And for those who want to know, I can assure you they have been sealed. I do not know what questions are in what boxes, because part of my role of the integrity of this show is to make sure that I can't sit down there and gerrymander the candidates picking up certain boxes. So we have the fun part of going around on this sheet. Chris Calvi-Freeman, you get to pick the first box.
I'll take box number 13, please.
Okay, and it's number question 5 on the question sheet. Do you support the use of masks, especially indoor, particularly on public transport, as an important tool for keeping COVID at bay and others safe?
That doesn't seem to be question 5 on my list, but 25, do you say? Okay.
Well, that's the point of the randomness.
Yeah, look, I think we're in very much a position of a period of transition with masks now, with the Prime Minister's announcement today. I'm going to continue to wear a mask. My wife is immunocompromised. I care and worry about her. I'm worried that we're still losing a lot of New Zealanders to COVID, and we're just not talking about it anymore. It's a bit like the road toll. People are just sort of taking it as the price we pay to live in this country, and that's not good enough. We're losing a lot of good people. I hope that the number of COVID infections will continue to trend down. But at the moment, I'm going to be careful, and I would support the use of masks on public transport until such time as it does.
Thank you. Next up, Yadana. What box number?
I'm going to choose number 7 because we've got about 7.5 years to meet our mode shift targets at Greater Wellington Regional Council.
I definitely love that. You're following the Tracy Martin approach, except not getting it to number 1. Okay, so it's question 9 on the question sheet. Wellington Water has been without fluoride for some time now. What is your response to that?
Well, for all the people who ever were worried that they were drinking fluoridated water, they probably didn't know the difference. So all the anti-fluoride people, psych. But I think what it shows is an issue of management. Thomas actually gave me some information about the management of fluoridation, where there was, I think that information wasn't passed on by Wellington Water to councillors until quite late. So we have an issue of how it's run as well as how we monitor things. So I would like to see our water being fluoridated. I would like to see it monitored better. This is why I would definitely support Three Waters, because that's to protect our drinking water, our stormwater and wastewater.
And funny thing was, it was the anti-fluoride group who found out it wasn't being fluoridated. So next up, Thomas Nash. What box number?
Oh, thanks, Sam. I'll take number 1.
Number 1.
Please.
Because you want to be voted 1, don't you?
I was going to say that, but it seemed a bit too self-serving. Couldn't quite bring myself to.
That's why you've got number 2 to help you out.
Okay, now you get to have the first round on the third question. You get the booby card, dodge the question.
Dodge the question.
Yeah, I know. So if you get a curveball question, you can use it to get out of it. But the principle behind it, we don't want you using it, because then you're trying to hide yourself from answering the questions. So we'd like you to re-pick another box because we still want an answer.
Yeah, so I get to keep my dodge the question Okay.
Yes, and Wayne,
I'll go,
Wayne,
number 2.
number 2. And Wayne Guppy has kept his as a memento for the council chamber. So you're welcome to keep that as well for a memento. We can have it in 2 different council chambers.
Thanks, Sam. Cherish it.
Okay, this one's a little bit more of a serious one. It's question number 18 on the question sheet. Councils are given roles and responsibilities from central government coming from regulation and legislation. These are referred to as unfunded mandates. What's your opinion on the unfunded mandates from central government?
Yeah, so this is a big problem, and I guess to say, as a framing for the question, I think New Zealand is the country in the OECD with the lowest proportion of revenue from taxes in the country going to local government compared to central government, and that's part of the reason why local government hasn't been delivering services. And it's a vicious cycle, isn't it? Because if you don't fund local government properly, then it doesn't perform. You don't get good people involved in it, and it fails to provide good services. So unfunded mandates are a problem, and we have a lot of legislative change and regulatory change that is coming our way on water, on climate, on transport, and a whole bunch of things, resource management. We're going to have to manage all of that, and we need the money to pay for it. So I think it doesn't make sense to keep pushing legislation our way without giving us the money to pay for it.
Okay, next up, Leigh, what box number?
Number 24,
24.
please.
Yeah, that one's down the back there.
I can't actually see the numbers at all, so I'm just
Hey,
gonna
that's all good.
wing
That's
it.
all good. I mean, to be honest, our camera over there doesn't catch the faces as good down that end as it does that end, but that one catches them brilliantly. Okay, so number question 21 on the question sheet. Do you think climate change should be the number one concern at the ballot box?
Yes. I haven't used up my minute, have I? So I'll just crack on and with that. Yes, it should be, obviously. Some of the stuff I said before in my little introduction, I don't see how there are other things that are more imminent for people. Obviously, we've just been talking about a pandemic. We're in the middle of a pandemic, well, the end of it, hopefully, close to it. We've got cost of living issues for people. It's not like there aren't other things to worry about. I get that, but this is it's global warming we're talking about. It's a big deal, and we have to do what we possibly can right here in the little Poneke to try to figure out what we're going to do and how we're going to survive it. So that's why I'm talking about resilience, adaptation, stuff that urban residents can do. I'd like to see regional council help people more with information about how to just do erosion control in your own backyard, stuff like that. Things that I've actually seen farmers and growers been doing in New Zealand for over 20 years now, because they know. So that's where I'm coming from.
Okay, and next up is Chris Montgomery. What box number?
I'll have 21, please.
And I do feel like we're on a bit of a fire tonight. Yes. Okay, question number 5 on the question sheet. I often want to take my bike on the train at the weekends and public holidays, but there are bus replacements which sometimes don't take bikes. What will you do to ensure bikes can always be taken on public transport?
Well, I think if the trains that can take bikes are replaced by buses, the replacements should be able to take your bikes as well. So you've got to replace like with like, really, don't you? I've found some of these questions a bit difficult with not being in the incumbent. So I haven't had enough of a good discussion around the why they've got bike train replacements. But yeah, I think they need to be available if they would have been available on the trains otherwise.
Okay, next up, David Leig coming in remotely. What box number?
Oh, yes. I wanted 24, but Leigh took that because that's my wedding anniversary. So I'll go for the silver anniversary, 25.
Okay, question number 12 on the question sheet. A councillor resigns 12 months before the next election. What would you propose for the vacancy?
I would say leave it vacant. 12 months is very close to the next election, and you've got a down period, probably at least 3 to 4 months, where councillors are pretty much offline anyway to staff. And if you're looking at a council with 13 elected people, I'm sure the others can actually fill the gap. So I would keep it vacant until the next election, rather than look at a by-election.
Okay, next up, Thomas Bryan. What box number?
Number 6. That's the last number of my street address.
Okay, question number 19 on the question sheet. Should councils employ public relations teams?
Well, what a question that is. I think it really depends on what the issues and the situation may be. I mean, obviously, if there's a crisis, then you need to have someone on board in a role, and maybe it's a contractor who can deal with specific issues. But if you're just saying on a day-to-day basis, do we need to have someone on staff like that? No. As I said, it really depends on the size of the organisation and what the issues are. And as we have a number of issues facing Greater Wellington around climate change, and we want to actually take people with us, then that may be something we decide we need to do in the future.
Okay, and I see you've been waiting very quietly there, Roger. What box number?
I'll go for 17, thanks, Sam. It's looking a bit lonely in the middle there.
I know it does. Okay, number question 17 on the question sheet.
Can you tell me what number that is on the other sheets that some of us have got?
It should be the same numbers.
No, they're not.
But that's not for me. That's for the Ray who's doing the graphics. So he knows exactly which key to pin up, especially when we've got remote logins. It's quite handy. Do you agree with Wellington City Council? I know that's not the council you cover. Decision to require vaccine passes for entry to public ratepayer supported facilities, despite no scientific justify this policy. I know there's a bit of a hindsight question there.
Well, I challenge the assertion that there's no scientific evidence to justify the requirements for a vaccine mandate. And on the contrary, there's a huge amount of evidence from authorities such as the World Health Organization, from our own public health experts in New Zealand, to say there's a very strong reason for vaccines, and that vaccines are highly effective as a public health measure to provide people resistance against contracting COVID-19. So I disagree with the basic assumption of the question.
And while your mic doesn't go away, we're on the next round and you're up first. What box number?
I'll go for number 9.
Okay, number question 7 on the question sheet. Regarding public transport, do you believe we should invest more or less relatively? If so, how do you see us getting to the required levels? And if not, what other methods do you have for tackling congestion and air pollution?
Oh, yes. So I absolutely agree we should be investing more. And I'll give you a number of areas where we need to do that. So one is in the transition to a fully electric bus fleet. So we've committed to a fully electric bus fleet by 2030. We currently have 83 electric buses on the streets. And we're going to require, as part of the tender documents that come in for the next round of bus contracts, that all buses will be electric from 2030 on. So another area for investment is in the area of trains. So we have put in a budget bid in 2022 for $360 million to bring in Lower North Island rail service from Palmerston North to Wellington to replace the ageing and decrepit Capital Connection carriages, replace them by a new rolling stock, which will be tri-mode electric rolling stock. Another area of investment is that we have just the Transport Committee recently signed off a regional rail plan for the Wellington region. And that's a $7.3 billion package for the next 30 years, which will see rapid increasing in the number of services and the frequency of services. And what that's going to do is attract more people to ride on rail rather than taking their cars, more mode shift and greater emissions reduction.
And I certainly look forward if we can get into 160 kilometres an hour heading to Palmerston North, which I believe we can do on the 3-foot 6 gauge we use for the railway. Next up, Thomas Bryan. What box number?
Box 30, please.
Box 30. And you get the lucky card of defer the question to another candidate.
Oh, that doesn't seem particularly fair.
Oh, got it there. You can hold it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so what replacement box number would you like?
10.
Okay, question number 22 on the question sheet. What are you going to do to ensure young people's voices are heard and actioned to keep our region vibrant and growing?
Well, the Regional Council has a number of advisory groups, and I'd like to see more young people involved. In fact, even having a position on that advisory committee, and if necessary, even establish a youth younger persons committee so we can actually hear from younger people as what the issues are and their suggestions on how we can improve the work and also how we can reach out to younger people. It's really important that we actually hear what they have to say and want them to participate.
Okay, next up, Yadana. What box number?
I'm going to choose number 5 because that's the number of candidates that will be elected for the Poneke constituency.
I love that. Okay, question number 11 on the question sheet when I get there. Regional Council representatives have been absent from meetings. How will you be active for the community across the trilennium? I don't know if that's many have been absent. Maybe the person thinks they're a no-show.
Many have not been absent. We've been very lucky with this triennium. Well, I
think the person might be thinking all councillors go there to eat their lunch and don't turn up and don't do any work because they don't look, based on the question.
How would you be active for the community across? Well, I guess it's also part of the job is not just turning up to meetings, but talking to officers, talking to affected communities, and having really good relationships in the community where the issues are relevant to particular places in our region. So that would be the first one. I talk for a living. That's what I've done on the radio. So I talk to a lot of people all the time about all sorts of issues. The other thing is I've spent about half of my life being involved in community groups, community initiatives. So that's something I'm really used to doing. So I've done it for half my life. So that's how I do it. I turn up to the meetings and talk to lots of people and listen.
I certainly look forward to a stall at the Newtown Market.
I'll just come to your stall, Sam.
I know. You can buy coffee. Next up, Thomas Nash. What box number?
I'll have 26. Clear that front line.
Yes, and if you come there with a keep cup, you get a 50-cent discount, which is worth twice as much to what the cup and the lid costs for a disposable. Okay, question 16. Did you attend the protest in Parliament in March, and what are your thoughts on it now?
Well, thanks, Sam. No, I didn't attend the protest in March, and actually, I was lucky enough to live on the other side of town and around here in Mount Vic, and I basically didn't go around that end of town at all for the entire time that the protest was on because I just felt a bit unsettled about it. I had a young baby at the time, and just felt a bit it's just sort of a bit aggressive and violent and unsavory in many ways. I think it was also sad. I mean, I had friends and people I've sort of grown up with who did go along and who had sort of gone down the rabbit hole in various ways. So, I mean, I think one of the things that I feel about it is that our public institutions need to be able to be relevant and trusted for people not to fall down rabbit holes and look for alternative sources of information that might lead them into sort of really negative antisocial behaviour. So that's up to us, I think, as councils to be one of those good public institutions that's relevant and trustworthy.
Okay, next up, Chris Calvi-Freeman. What box number?
I'll have 22, please.
Okay, number 23 on the question sheet. Could you please share your thoughts on the COVID-19 vaccination and whether you have any affiliations with Voices of Freedom, Freedom Rights Coalition, or any other organisation involved in the occupation of Parliament? That is really weird. Those are right next door to each other.
I have no affiliation with any of those groups. I think the whole process has been both sad and worrying. Sad because people have subscribed to various social media channels and have been allowed to absorb information that is misleading and wrong in one respect or another. Worrying in that our democracy has been threatened in Wellington. I think most Wellingtonians felt threatened with the large crowds in Wellington. Some of the people there, bless them, are simply misguided. Others were there to commit anarchy of one description or another. So no, not having a bar of it.
Okay, next up, David Leig. What box number would you like?
8, please, Sam.
Okay, what was box number? We just missed it all here in the studio.
8. Lucky 8.
28. Oh,
No, 8.
Oh.
No, 8. Go
Okay.
back. Right there.
Okay, question number 14 on the question sheet. This year sees the start of Māori wards. Do you believe this should be extended to the regional council?
We did actually go to Mana Whenua to invite them to if they really wanted a Māori ward. They declined because we have a very good working relationship with all of the six local iwi. We have a very good pathway in terms of co-design and then co-governance. So I think we're actually in a better position going forward, working with our Mana Whenua partners.
Okay, thank you for that. Next up, Chris Montgomery. What box number?
I'll go for number 18, please. Moving on, clearing that front row again.
Yeah, that
And
seems to be the theme.
It's the age of my eldest child too.
Now, can they drive a manual?
She just got her full license. No, she can't drive a manual.
Oh my God.
She drives a scooter
Oh,
and rides a bike.
Well, that's still right. That doesn't take up too much space on the road. Okay. Question number 3 on the question sheet. We've all recently discovered that there's no oversight of the fluoridation program and that our teeth have been rotting away on your watch. Well, that's a bit hard. You're not an incumbent. What steps would you put in place to ensure this does not happen again?
I'll just refer back to the other question too, which has covered a lot of this. I mean, there was a breakdown in management and governance within Wellington Water, and then how it got reported back to the regional council. So, you know, there's obviously process issues that need to be sorted out there. So I think that's got to be looked at, but in the wider context of the 3 waters, because that's where we're going to have a bit more of a better, clearer processes across a much wider area to ensure that there's consistency.
Okay, next up, Lee. What box number?
28, please.
The box I thought David Lee sat there and said. Joys of remote connections. Okay, question number 13 on the question sheet. What's your biggest priority for the next term, and how do you intend on delivering? On that?
Well, my biggest priority is that the climate change adaptation and resilience, but I think I've talked about that enough. So I'm going to default back down to my second priority, which is more effective and efficient public transport for Wellingtonians. I spend a lot of time travelling to Kapiti, family in Kapiti, Waikanai. I spent a lot of time travelling to Wairarapa on the 821, the bus replacement, which has lasted over 6 months and apparently is going to go all year. That's a hell of a long time to be in a double-decker bus going over the Rimataka Hills. But that's what we do right now. So yeah, one of my priorities, my second highest priority, will be to sort out what's going on with our public transport that we have now. I think it's fantastic what has been done, no question. There's more to do, a lot more money to find to make it happen. But I wonder if we've really thought about what a post-COVID working from home world looks like and what it really needs in terms of transport service. So that's the sort of thing I'll be looking at.
Okay, and what's the view like on the top floor of a double-decker going over the Rimatakas?
You don't go on the double-decker because on the top, you go on the bottom. If your tummy's a little bit, you stay down the bottom.
Okay, next question, next box number is coming from David Leig.
Oh, what's there? 11. Is there 11 there?
We can do that. That's sold.
Okay.
Question number 6 on the question sheet. Climate change is one of the biggest threats. What will you personally do to role model decarbonisation?
Well, our biggest emission is actually transport. So personally, I mean, I've already purchased an electric vehicle for my wife, and I've also got another one to replace my current vehicle. So it is about electrification, but we also need to rethink how we as consumers contribute to the to carbon to our global emissions, because this is around consumerism, and it's individual, and it's not really about pointing the finger at industry and sectors. It needs to start from your own household and you as an individual. So I think transport is probably the biggest area which we can actually make a big difference in. Going electric is the way to go.
Okay, thanks for that. Next up, Chris Calvi-Freeman. What box number?
I'll take that one right on the end. Thank you. Number 29.
No problem. I thought we were going to get 3 questions out of each candidate tonight. I thought we're doing quite well. I know, I was expecting 2, so I'm proud that we're actually getting on to 3. Okay. Yeah. Okay, question number 1 on the question sheet. As more farms are turned into pine forests, how will that affect the requirement in the future for poplar poles to control erosion?
You know, Sam, when I looked at these questions, I thought that was the one question I really didn't want to ask. Now, Thomas has given me a dodge the question. Can I have that? Can I use that?
Yeah, well, we consider do that. You need to talk to...
Not because I'm cowardly, but I just think I could answer one of the other ones with a bit more intelligence than that.
You seem to feel like you've got an answer, Roger, for that question.
Yeah, I'll volunteer to answer the question.
Okay,
So
well,
actually.
Roger's going to answer it. Do I still get another question?
Collaboration in action.
Look at that. Yes,
See?
isn't that lovely? We're all mates here. Big hug.
So the issue here is it either poplars or pine forest? And the answer is not an either or issue. It's the right tree in the right situation. So radiata pine are fine if it's a flat land and deep soil, but they're not good if, like the East Coast, you've got a steep hill and shallow soil. Because what happens is you get slipping of the slope down the hill, and it doesn't work at all. So if you've got a slope with shallow soil, you need poplars. If you want to have a maximum carbon emission on the flat land, it's fine with radiata pine. So that's the issue. And if I'm elected, I'll really push hard for the new rules around farm forestry plans, for the regional council to be able to look at those plans and for our officers to be able to say, nah, that won't work in that situation because for all those reasons it doesn't work. And I think that will address the concern that the question's raised.
Okay, now Chris, what's the replacement box number?
I'll go down 1 to 27 there. Thank you.
I love this. Teamwork. We're already getting collective response answers and they're not even been sworn in yet. Actually, no, the voting papers haven't been sent out yet either. Okay, question number 24 on the question sheet. There we are. What would you bring? Would you bring in household food waste collection, stop waste from going to the landfill, and would you support the regional council establishing a joint approach alongside other councils to do this?
Look, I'd certainly want to see a study done on that. I think it's a very good idea in principle, but the road to hell is often paved with good intentions. When I look at the way recycling works at the moment, not the food stuff, but the plastics, the cardboard, the tin cans, etc., and the huge quantity of it that's going to waste anyway, and when I look at some of the bins that you see filled with, well, let's just say I wouldn't want to have to manually sort that stuff. So, as I said, I would welcome a study on this and tread carefully. I want to see whether it's likely to be successful or not, before I would vote yes or no on it.
Okay, next up, Leigh, what box number?
That one at the end there. 23.
23. Thank you.
I like that collaboration on saying what's up there. Okay, question number 26 on the question sheet. Do you agree that if there is a move to introduce volumetric charges for water for residents, it should only be introduced with the consent of the majority of voters? Sounds like a referendum.
Yes, it's an interesting one, this one, because if it's not introduced with the consent of the majority of voters, I mean, how are you going to do it without? So you're not going to, are you going to do it on that issue alone? That would be weird. I don't think people would want you to do that. I think probably looking at the first bit, though, about whether there should be a volumetric charge, I think a lot of people think they already pay that. So I think there's actually a lot of work to be done to explain to people what they're actually paying for when they see that water charge on their rates bill, because I'm not sure that people are even that clear on that. So I would probably hire a communications professional who could take care of that for us and try to explain to people what they're actually paying for in the first place before you go talking about referendums and changing things up too much.
Certainly agree with referendums. Thomas Nash, what box number?
14, please.
It's all right, the closed captions have now caught it. Yeah, the joy is if you're on Facebook, it auto closed captions the show, but it doesn't necessarily always get the words right. Yeah, cyclones, it says cycling, yes. Yes, I do. Yeah, I do remember that. Okay, question number 2 on the question sheet. Greater Wellington Regional Council has recently considered bus fares. Do you think bus fares should be free? And if so, what would you, when would you implement this?
Well, thanks for the question, Sam. Yeah, I do think public transport should be free. I mean, I consider public transport to be a basic public good alongside public education, public health, public welfare. So I would treat it in the same way. It's a little difficult to make it free right now. First of all, we don't have the money to do that. It would have to be a central government thing. And secondly, we probably wouldn't have the capacity on the network, especially at peak time, to manage the increase in patronage that we would expect if it were free. So I think we have to stage it. And I think the recent decisions that we've made under Roger's sage chairpersonship of the Transport Committee to increase off-peak, reduce off-peak fares so that we can increase patronage during the off-peak. That's a good start. That's an area where we can reduce fares without putting pressure on the network. So that's what I would say. Yes, let's do it, but let's stage it.
No problem. And next up, Roger, what box number?
I'll go for 19, thank you.
Okay, question number 28 on the question sheet. What do you think are will be the three biggest issues for the regional council in the next term, 2022 to 2025?
I think that the biggest issue will undoubtedly be climate change. We've made some really good progress this term, I think, in terms of, for example, the bus electrification. But there are some other big issues as well that have to be tackled. We made a decision that the regional policy statement should require a target of halving our greenhouse gas emissions in the region by 2030, which is the IPCC target, which was much bolder than what was originally being proposed. So that's a big issue. Second issue, I think, is water. So we've got some major problems in terms of pollution of our streams and rivers and lakes and coastal areas in the region. So we've done the work through our Whaitua committee to address what needs to be done. We now need to implement that. The third biggest issue, I think, is our partnership arrangements with tangata whenua. We have a partnership relationship. The question is how we go forward on that. Do we go to a co-governance model? Do we, at the very least, what we should be doing is working in partnership, involving tangata whenua in all of our decision-making processes, adopting te ao Māori and matauranga Māori as part of the way we do things around here, and progressing, in my view, towards co-governance within about 2 years.
Okay, next up, Yadana, what box number?
I'll choose number 16 because that's how you get youth participation, by lowering the voting age to 16.
It's all right, I don't mind these little advertisings. They sit down there
We've
and
lowered
promote.
it twice before in the 70s. It dropped from 20 to 18.
Yeah, in 75, they also expanded it to permanent residence as well for the first time. I think we're still one of the few countries in the world that actually allows permanent residents the right to vote. Yeah, however, they can't stand for office. They still got to swear their allegiance now to the King of New Zealand. It was the Queen of New Zealand last week, though. So, yeah, little bit different, but you know how it goes when Queen Elizabeth moves on. Okay, question number 8 on the question sheet. What are the best strategies to reduce flood risks?
What are the best strategies? Okay, I think we need to learn to live with water better. Water is going to do whatever it wants. We have to move with it. So I think we've heard a lot of our rural communities having to bear the brunt of adapting and keeping the waters clean. I mean, this is part of flood risk, as well as we actually pollute the water here in our urban spaces as well. We also pipe most of the water beneath us. So about over 90% of our urban streams and rivers are piped beneath us here in the Wellington catchment. That's not going to work as we have more intensive rainfalls. So I think living with nature by planting the right types of flora would be really helpful. Putting the natural curves back into our waterways would also help. Part of what we're going to have to look at a region as well is managed retreat from coastal areas. That's one way we'll have to manage flood protection. And I think it's really important that our public institutions are leading the way to protect us all together, rather than individuals shouldering the risk when the insurance industry is signalling that climate change is coming. That'll be reflected in individuals' policies. But as a public institution, we can collectively be proactive of how we protect one another from it.
Okay, next up, Chris Montgomery. What box number?
I'll have number 20, please.
Okay, question number 4 on the question sheet. The GW Council recently has failed in its oversight of our fluoridation project. Would you subsidise or cover the costs of our dental treatment for the next 5 years to make up for it failing? I feel sorry for you getting that question.
That's okay. I did a bit of research on this. And fluoride is really most important for children and adolescents. So areas where they have fluoride in the water, there's a 40% reduction in tooth decay. And so I was quite pleased to hear that well, not pleased to hear that there was no fluoride in the water because that would have been good. But those children and adolescents who are most affected by tooth decay, they're already currently subsidised dental work. So I think that it might end up the costs might get passed on to the dental service in the future. Then others in the Ministry of Health will probably have to start thinking about and budgeting for that.
Okay, next up, Thomas Bryan. What box number?
What have we got left?
We've got 15, 12, 3 or 4.
Let's go with 3.
Okay, question number 20 on the question sheet. Should the Regional Council be funding and helping to organise community events?
Well, I think that really depends on what the community event is. If it's helping a community group, reaching out to them, helping them organise through staff, volunteering, etc., then why not? I think the more that Regional Council can do to work with community organisations, that's great. If it's about putting on a concert down at Sky City Stadium, then unless it's a fundraiser or something that has some real benefit to the community, then probably not. I don't think it's probably the Regional Council's role to get into bringing in overseas acts and those sorts of events.
Okay. We have managed to get 3 questions out of our candidates here tonight, which is more than what I was expecting. I was only expecting us to get to 2, but thank you for being so prompt and sticking within timelines. So we're going to take a hard break now to give our crew a bit of a rest and give our candidates time to mingle with our audience to try and shore up their number 1 vote. And then we'll see you after the break with hard-hitting questions. Okay, and welcome back to It's in the Ballot. We've had a bit of a good round with the candidates. We're great. We've got 3 questions out of them, or 24 questions out of the question boxes. So now let's kick in for hard-hitting questions. Okay, and welcome back. So with hard-hitting questions, these are questions that are very vital for the community, and should we say, they want to know the answers from all candidates. So we'll be going around to all candidates tonight for the hard-hitting questions and see what they bring up. So hard-hitting question number 1 is, what's your position on free waters reform and why have you came to that position? Let's start off with Leig.
Okay, thanks, Sam. 3 waters in 1 minute. When you're a ratepayer in Wellington City and you watch the turd taxis going past on your way to work, you're thinking there's not something quite wrong here. There's something just not right. And obviously there needs to be a huge amount of more money and time and people and thought invested in how we sort this out. Wellington's infrastructure is not good enough. I'm 56 years old, and it seems to me like we've not really talked about this for probably about 50 of those years, and we really, really, really need to start talking about it now and sorting it out. So if 3 waters gives us a hint of an idea of a possibility that there might be a way to fix it faster and with more, say, 50 years worth of security, let's take it. I don't think it's perfect. I look at it and think, I wouldn't do it that way myself. I understand roughly why they want to structure it the way they do. And I think I'd like to be involved in how it gets put together in its final iterations, because I think it could look quite a lot different from what we've been talking about to date.
Okay, next up, David Leig.
Thank you. My position is that I'll rather have 4 entities managing water poorly rather than 67 entities. I think this is, I mean, Three Waters is the right place to be, but it's been rushed, and because it's been rushed, it's actually leaving councils behind and the general public. So I think, yes, I'm supportive of Three Waters. We do need to slow it down so that we don't leave people behind. And I think, you know, going the way of the district health boards, I can see some benefits, especially around central government funding. So I'm in favour of Three Waters.
Okay, thank you for that, David. Next up, Roger.
So I support the Three Waters. The biggest reason I think is it's been calculated that it'll cost $180 billion to invest in our Three Waters infrastructure across the whole country. And frankly, local authorities do not have the funding capacity to do that. The advantage of the water services entities is they will be able to raise capital to be able to do that sort of investment, which we desperately need. So if that happens, we will be able to stop worrying so much as we need to about whether our drinking water is safe. We'll be able to swim in our beaches without worrying about contracting diseases. And we won't have to have the spectre of geysers rushing up out of the street because of broken water pipes. Yeah, I support it. The main issue, I think, for me is that the voice of the community is not lost, and there's some mechanism, and this is supposed to be part of the structure, where the water services entities hear loud and clear the voices of the community.
Okay, next up, Thomas Bryan.
Well, I'm not going to break a trend. I'm also very much in favour of Three Waters for many of the reasons that have been given. The costs involved, we can't afford it. If we were to go down that path, it'd be a significant, huge rates increase for everyone. And when we've got parts of the region whose water is substandard, through no fault of their own, we need to have a better way to have water that is fit for purpose for all New Zealanders. And I certainly think we need to have better involvement with some of the decisions that are being made, but we also need to, as a council, I think, need to work more closely with central government to make sure that the outcomes are what we want.
Okay, next up, Yadana.
Again, not breaking the trend here with the other candidates. I support Three Waters reform as well. I think it's been miscommunicated in terms of how we've received the information of what it's to do. People fearing co-governance have seemed to have forgotten that some local authorities have failed in their duty to provide clean water, clean, safe drinking water to their citizens. I'm thinking of Hawke's Bay in particular. Also with what we've seen around Wellington here with our infrastructure with stormwater and wastewater, it just shows that sometimes our elected authorities aren't capable of taking the job as well as the costs. But I want to take it back to first principles of what water is and its own intrinsic value, or its mauri, as has been identified in Te Mana o Te Wae. And that's what we need to look at, is that we are here to look after that water for future generations. We can argue about the billions of dollars, we can argue about who's in charge of it, but fundamentally, we haven't been doing a good job of it. And any entity that will look after it and ensure its intrinsic value, because we all need it to survive, has definitely got my support.
Okay, next up, Chris Calvi-Freeman.
Water supply and drainage have never been sexy. They've never been a vote winner for local councils. So city councils and district councils, by and large, have shoved that issue down the pecking order and hoped that it won't pop up as a geyser. You might say that the city and local councils have just been going through the motions over the years. And I know that in Wellington, we certainly haven't. If that doesn't win the worst pun of the evening. Look, I support the Three Waters reform simply because we can't go on as we are at the moment. But I am concerned that in government over the decades, you centralise, you regionalise, you decentralise, and everything goes round and round in circles. The new bureaucracies may get too bloated and someone might want to change it again in another decade. I think with water, like with many other things in life, it's the people that are involved. If the water authorities under the new regime can do a good job, can run a good ship, and not turn themselves into bloated bureaucracies with enormous salaries, then I think that's got to be a step in the right direction.
Okay, Thomas Nash.
Well, thanks for the question. Yeah, well, I mean, I support the Three Waters reform program as well. We have an infrastructure deficit in New Zealand, a major one that has been growing over decades, actually, and it's partly because the systems that we've set up to manage infrastructure, local councils, have the wrong kind of incentive structure for the people who are around the table. They're elected on a 3-year cycle. There's a huge amount of pressure from homeowners to keep rates low, and that doesn't really, that's not really compatible with investing in large-scale infrastructure for the future, both on water and on transport and on a range of things, actually. I think it's worth thinking about some of the opposition to Three Waters as well, because I think, as Yadana said, some of the opposition is couched around an opposition to co-governance and more involvement from mana whenua and iwi in the management of our water resources. So I think that's problematic, that opposition, and we should recognise that opposition for what it is, rather than a principled opposition to, let's say, the sort of style of our management of water as well. So I think we should go forward with it, and we should be ready to call out some of the toxic opposition that we see out there.
Okay, and next up, Chris Montgomery.
Right, I'm not going to back with the trend either, and I support Three Waters. Water security is one of the world's sort of major issues is going to be going forward. So we've really got to make sure that we get it right, and that we've got the right infrastructure across the country, and sort of move away from that parochial view of managing it on a smaller scale, because we're actually quite a small country, and so, you know, scale-wise, actually, you know, having 4 is managing all of New Zealand is not a bad thing. I'm also really concerned about some stories that I hear about the water quality, drinking water quality in places that have really insanely high nitrate levels in the soil. And if a local group wants to keep it that way, you know, there should be a sort of a more of a national focus saying, actually, that's not right, because sometimes you can't see beyond your own or past your own vested interests, and you need to be pulled back to actually see the bigger picture. We've got to have consistent standards across to make sure that all New Zealanders have good, healthy chances.
Okay, thank you for that. Now we'll head on to a hard-hitting question number 2. There is currently a provision under Let's Get Wellington Moving for a light rail or bus rapid transit network. Which one of these options would you prefer, and why? And would you make a provision for an eastern suburb branch from Newtown? Let's start off with Roger.
Yes, I support light rail. Let me just explain why. So Let's Get Wellington Moving is not just about a transport system. It's about what sort of a city or region do we want to live in. And the transport system is to support that. So it's projected that we will need an extra 50 to 80,000 people living in Wellington by 30 years out. We cannot have those people just living in greenfield sprawl on the northern suburbs. We need intensification within our existing urban footprint. So that's what's proposed in the preferred option, which is a light rail from the railway station through Newtown to Berhampore. It's proposed there'll be intensification along that corridor. It's proposed there'll be an extra 23 to 26,000 houses built in 30 years' time in the south and the central and the east. Now, those 23 to 26,000 houses have a lot of people who want to catch mass rapid transit into Wellington. It's estimated to be 3,500 passengers an hour wanting to catch mass rapid transit. Light rail is the only option which will be able to carry that number of people. Bus rapid transit does not have the capacity. And that's because light rail vehicles can be long, that they run on rails so they can take about 300 persons per vehicle. A bus rapid transit vehicle is shorter because it's running on wheels on the road, and it can only take 110 people. So if we want to be able to serve the people who are going to live in this intensified environment, we must have light rail. And yes, I would provide for a spur from Newtown to the eastern suburbs through a tunnel under Mount Albert.
Okay, next up, David Leigh.
Oh, thank you. I'm probably a bit of an outlier on this one because I don't support light rail. My option is option 2, which is bus rapid transit. I think light rail is somewhat antiquated. It's very disruptive for the, especially for the business sector during construction. If you look at Auckland and Sydney, you'll know how disruptive it is. Very super expensive. I don't think no one's even socialised the real cost to Wellingtonians. We're talking about 7.4 billion. That's current day cost. I mean, it jumped $1 billion just in the last six months. So these are just almost crude estimates. And if you look at the Wellington city share, it's a 60-20-20 share. So if you're a Wellingtonian, and if you include what the Greater Wellington share is imposed on Wellington city ratepayers, you're looking at about $2 billion. So that's per household. I did a crude calculation. That's $25,000 per household, and it's going to be the shortest. If we're looking at light rail, it's the shortest light rail network in the world, and probably the most expensive. So, bus priority is the baseline, and if we can get rapid bus transit, that would be a big win. So, I'm for option 2.
Okay, thanks for that, David. Next up, Thomas Nash.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, it's two Thomases and 2 Chris's.
Yeah.
What are the odds?
Hey, thanks, Sam. Yeah, so I mean, the preferred option that's been determined by the 3 partners, which is Wellington City, Greater Wellington, and the government, is light rail. So they have made a provision for bus rapid transit if light rail doesn't stack up. But the preferred option is light rail, and I heard Michael Wood, the Transport Minister, reiterate that very explicitly the other day. So it's good to just get that out there. It's not that much more expensive than bus rapid transit, but it is much better, and it's a game changer really when you put light rail in, because it's a totally different tool to bus rapid transit because the capacity is just so much higher, and it does allow, as Roger said, that intensification of your urban form, which is the most important thing we can do for reduction of emissions, because it means that people can live in town, they don't have to have a car, they can walk around, they can bike around, they can just go downstairs and jump on the light rail and get around. When they put light rail in Canberra, they saw a 25% upswing in public transport usage overnight. And immediately, people who had been clamouring for alternatives like bus rapid transit were saying, hey, can we have the next stage of our light rail? I think we'll have the same in Wellington. And so I'd say once we put it in, yes, we probably should have a spur from Newtown, as Roger said, under Mount Albert, going through to the eastern suburbs.
Okay, and from one Thomas to another, Thomas Bryan.
Well, I'm a bit of a train rail fanatic. And I really see the value and benefits of light rail. However, I haven't seen any real cost analysis, any cases really done to, there's been lots of big picture figures out there, but no real scope and a real plan to actually tell me this is really what it's going to cost. And we know that prices continually go up. And so whether it's light rail or rapid bus systems, they're going to keep going up in price anyway. So for me, I would rather see light rail. Let's do it right the first time. And I would certainly support a spur across to the eastern suburbs. I think if we can take it through to the airport, we can make better use of transfer hubs that will make sure that people are using it. I think for me, the other added plus is it gives us a great opportunity to build a great network with great accessibility platforms to enable people, older people, people in wheelchairs with mobility devices, etc., to board as an even platform. Just roll on, walk on, and it's so much easier. than trying to step up and step off for all of us.
It sounds like we could have potentially 10 wheelchair passengers per train at least on there by the sounds of that.
At least.
Okay, next up, Chris Calvi-Freeman.
Yes, I very much support light rail. Roger and the two Thomases have laid out some of the advantages, and I won't go back over those except to say that the capital costs may be higher than putting in a guided bus or bus rapid transit system, but the operating costs will be lower, and they are the costs that tend to add up over the many years. Lower because of the ratio of driver to passengers, lower also because of the undoubted popularity of light rail. When light rail's been put in, as was mentioned in Canberra, but also in all sorts of other cities of the similar size to Wellington, in North America and in Europe, the patronage has far exceeded expectations, which is pretty good. Usually it's the opposite. You get that optimism bias with new projects, but that doesn't happen. Would I send it out to the airport and Miramar? Absolutely. It needs to branch off from Newtown. It goes under Mount Albert past the zoo. It comes out in Kilburnie. It goes through Kilburnie along Rongotai Road. As far as I'm concerned, it then goes through Bridge Street alongside the airport, which is an ideal site for a depot. It goes under the runway there to the airport and then up to the northern, up to the main part of Miramar. It's a no-brainer to me that we should have light rail to the airport, and it should be running 18, 20 hours a day. And I'm sure it will succeed if that happens.
And it sounds like they will definitely help the hospital workers outside the hospital as well, by the sounds of that. So going from one Chris to another, Chris Montgomery.
Well, thank you. Yes, I haven't also seen lots of detailed figures, but I, in theory, support light rail as well. I think it's a good opportunity to really rethink how we do it. I think bus rapid transit is just sticking with the status quo, and I think there's a whole lot more chance for us to do something interesting in terms of redesigning the hubs that the rapid transit would, or light rail would provide, and you know, thinking about those 15-minute suburbs and things like that, and if we are going to have much more higher density housing, I'm really keen to see how we can get green spaces in there too. So how does that get designed into a whole new hub? That would be really great. In terms of eastern suburbs, yes, getting people to the airport would be great. I live in Hataitai. I hate going through the current tunnel. I would love for a tunnel that takes a light rail to also take cars, and so that the current tunnel that's currently got cars and a few pedestrians and brave scooter or bike riders, to actually just be for active transport and get faster things away from everybody else.
Okay, next up, Leigh.
I can just hear my mother watching this saying, we should never have got rid of the trams. And, you know, I don't know about the light rail project. I'm interested in the fact that we have incumbents here who don't agree on that. I think that's interesting. There must have been some useful chats around the table. One vote against, right. Well, it's interesting though. I think that, yeah, we've obviously got ourselves a city that is very, very compact, and I wonder about the fact that we don't make it easy for people to get from the airport to the rest of the city. It is weird compared to other places you go to around the world. I also think that some congratulations should go to those of you who've managed to get the airport bus back. That's fantastic. Should never have gone. But I do wonder too, though, about this whole idea of thousands of people coming into the city every day. Like I think I've said earlier on, I think that the world after COVID, working from home, is a different one, and the way people move and what they want to do with their day and where they want to spend it is different. And I would just like to see us think about that when we put together a public transport system, because it isn't the way it used to be.
And next up, Yadana.
Well, I feel as though everyone's done my work for me on this one.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Last word, Saw. I agree with what everyone said. I support, well, the majority of what everyone has said tonight, which is I do support light rail. And I think history is a really good judge of what we do. If you think about Auckland and how long it took for them to get their city rail link in, I believe that was one of the greatest regrets of Mayor Robinson's mayoralty in the long before I was born time, that they didn't get rail through. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be in a walker regretting the fact that we didn't get light rail in. We're allowed to live in a 21st century city, and that's what we need to plan for. Yes, it's $7 billion now, but that's going to cost us a lot of money in the future if we come back round and have this kōrero again in decades' time. Thomas, I really take your point about this being an accessible solution for public transport. We have to make it work for everyone in our community. So I 100% support light rail. It is a little bit like Back to the Future, Leigh. I agree. I was like, yeah, there's other sort of tram lines that used to exist. But I think it's also about resiliency. Light rail is going to shore us up against the increase in price of fossil fuel, or the idea that the private car is still going to get us everywhere. So it may be $7 billion now, but it's money that we are saving ourselves in the future.
And I think another regret from Auckland is the Auckland Harbour Bridge not having the rail link. That's something else I do know. I won't say it on here, but I've heard there was some not so coy dealings back in the 1950s with that. Okay, so we'll get to hard-hitting question number 3. Could you please share your thoughts on the COVID-19 vaccination, whether you have any affiliations with Voices for Freedom, Freedom Rights Coalition, or any other organisations involved in the occupation at Parliament? I do know someone's already answered that tonight, so if you want to, you're welcome to answer it again. Let's start off with Thomas Nash.
Thanks for the question. Yeah, so I don't have any affiliation with any of the organisations involved in Voices for Freedom or any of the anti-mandate or anti-vaccination groups. I'm happy and happy to be fully vaccinated. And one thing I'd say about the vaccine is it's kind of amazing that a vaccine was produced so quickly. And I do think that one of the things I was concerned about was the availability of the vaccine in other countries that don't have as much money as New Zealand. So obviously that's not really an issue for us here, but certainly I think there was quite a lot of vaccine inequity internationally. So that's been a concern of mine on the vaccination side. But yeah, I think my orientation to this whole thing is that there are people who are vulnerable to severe disease and severe harm from COVID-19, and those people should be in a priority for us in all of the public health measures we put in place. And so that's how I have orientated towards the pandemic, I think.
Okay, next up, Roger.
Yes, I saw a really interesting article in this morning's Dom Post by Dr. Susie Wiles, and she said people are asking her the question, should we get rid of the vaccine mandate or should we get rid of the mask mandate, etc.? And she said that's the wrong question. The right question is, if we're going to get rid of those things, what public health measures are we going to put in their place? Because just because we're down to like 1,000 cases today, I think, and 10 deaths, that doesn't mean to say we're not going to go back up again. We expect this to come in waves. We will have to cope with these issues in the future, and we need to have other public health measures in place, like ventilation in buses or purified air to compensate for if people are not wearing masks. No, I have no affiliation with Voices for Freedom. I must say I was quite disturbed that the underlying issues around misinformation and disinformation and threats of violence and the influence of people like Steve Bannon, who used to be Trump's strategist, pulling strings from America and providing funding to the groups here. So there's a real issue for our society, I think, to grapple with those issues. We need to be listening to other people, I think, but we also need to be coming up with positive alternatives.
Okay, next up, David Leigh.
Oh, thank you, Sam. I mean, yeah, definitely no affiliation. I do have friends who went down to the protest, but you know, we're offered free vaccination, and it's accessible and rolled up quite efficiently. I can't see, I mean, why anyone even would would see that as an issue. I think, you know, if people are entitled to express their displeasure about, you know, certain policy approaches, but I think they overstepped the line when they occupied Parliament. We were living quite close. We were about only 600 metres away from the protest, and it was quite intimidating for my daughter, who was going to one of the high schools in the area, because she was approached a few times, and one of her friends even had her mask ripped off her. So I think that's when freedom to protest crosses the line. So yeah, that's my opinion.
Okay, next up, Chris Montgomery.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm fully vaccinated and did it because I figured that people in Ministry of Health were doing with the experts, and so I wanted to follow their advice. Also because I see older people and vulnerable people in the community every week. I sort of have regular interactions and didn't want to put them at risk. So I was wanting to do my bit in terms of the community response. I didn't go down to the protest and have no affiliations with those groups. I do believe in people's right to protest, and I did have friends that went in the very early time, but I think, like a lot of Wellingtonians, the first few days kind of then took quite a serious turn after that, and that was when it started to feel uncomfortable, and it comes back to that information thing, doesn't it? You know, we do have to support, if we're going to be doing anything or making any moves that people might feel threatened by, then communication and actually helping people move through and having decent discussions, but getting to a sort of a common goal is what we wanted to be aiming for. So, yeah.
Okay, next up, Chris Calvi-Freeman.
Look, I already responded to that question previously and indicated my feelings towards Freedom Rights Coalition and the other organisations as being part pity and part disdain, concern about the number of people who wanted to latch on to overthrow the government or whatever their motives were. Just looking at the first part of it, my thoughts on COVID-19 vaccination. Yep, there has been 1 or 2 deaths in New Zealand caused directly by the vaccination, and that's terribly regrettable, but must have been thousands and thousands of lives saved in New Zealand alone, let alone the world. People who are concerned and trying to read conspiracy theories into vaccination drives need to understand that our lives are getting longer and safer and more secure. But without those vaccinations, we're seeing a return around the world to smallpox and diseases like that. And that can't happen. Yes, Big Pharma is getting rich out of developing and producing these vaccinations, but we don't really have a choice as far as I'm concerned. They are saving lives, and and my thoughts on that are that we really do need to continue to support vaccinations.
Yadana.
I don't have any affiliation to those organisations at all. In fact, I was watching the protests quite closely, as I have been someone who has been trespassed from Parliament grounds before, so it was quite a curious thing to watch, of seeing a protest movement that I completely didn't align with. I think what it boils down to me with public health measures against COVID-19 and a pandemic is that pandemic responses are as a body of knowledge that has been developed over thousands of years from various pandemics humankind has faced. But really what it boils down to me is the individual right and your freedom for whatever you want in your body versus the collective good. I mean, I really didn't see, if the vaccine was risky to me, that was a small price to pay for making sure our immunocompromised whānau and other whānau were safe. So I didn't put myself above the collective, and that's where I sit with the COVID-19 vaccine. In terms of people who are falling to misinformation and to these groups that are these online social communities, I think that points to a bigger problem we have in our society, where our public institutions, perhaps the way that we receive information, is not relevant to many people, particularly in the provinces. We live in Wellington, we're very close to government, we are always part of it, we know the people who are making the laws, we probably have friends that work in Ministry of Health. The further you get out in Aotearoa, there aren't those connections, and government seems further away, it seems remote, it seems opaque and faceless. So the thing to take away from what has happened from the protests in March, I feel, is how do we strengthen our offline communities? How do we reach out? It's no good chastising those people whose good minds, good critical minds, questioning minds, have gone down these rabbit holes. We need to reach out.
Okay, next up, Leigh.
Pretty short and sweet, really. No affiliation at all with those groups. Definitely 100% support our national approach to dealing with COVID. I'm actually really proud of the fact that New Zealand handled it the way it did. I think we know how to knuckle down and get on and get shit done when we have to, and we did. I am 100% vaxxed, and as I think I mentioned to you before, Sam, I had my oldies double boosted this morning. So I'm right up there.
Okay, and last, Thomas, Bryan.
Well, I'm double vaxxed, double boosted, and I would, if there's another shot one needs to have in the next short while, then I'll be rolling up the sleeve for that. I work, socialise, and belong to a community, it's a disabled people's community, and there are many in that community who are at risk, whether it's around people not wearing masks, whether it's around people not being vaccinated, and they have rights as well. And I guess that's where I was really quite concerned with the protest march. And I was saying before that I was walking up Lambton Quay one day, and I hadn't realised there were going to be this massive march down Lambton Quay. All the noise, I was totally disorientated from all the noise. I couldn't hear where I needed to go. And I got rescued by someone and got me around the corner, which thank goodness for them. But along the journey, people came off the road and grabbed hold of people who were on the footpath and said, how'd you like to have your freedom taken away from you? Now, to me, that is not right. People have rights to protest. I've protested myself many a time for rights for communities that I belong to or other people I have affinity with their cause. But when you step over that line, you lose my respect for whatever your views may be. And when you start taking it out on other people who are going about their business, then I really don't have any support for them.
Thank you for that. Now let's, we've got 7 minutes to go, so can we get 1 minute each for closing statements, because we're going to already be going into overtime. So let's start off with Chris Montgomery. What's your closing statement on why the Wellington voters should put you as their number one preference?
I have a reputation for getting stuff done. I've got the energy and the enough governance experience, but open to good ideas, and I feel the urgency for climate action and sort of in a just transition. So that means that we do need to connect with the communities that need the most help. So vote for Chris for number one, Chris M.
Okay, next up, David Leigh.
Experience. I'm being an urban planner. It really does help being on being at Greater Wellington, since it is an environmental protection agency with a strong public transport focus. And if elected, I'm not going to promise big things. It's really about finishing what we have already started. And I do really want to focus on all the good work which we've started off in this term around transport and a strong focus on water. Thank you.
Okay, next up, Yadana, and for number 1.
Oh.
Make that point very clear.
Oh, is that okay, Thomas? Okay. Just to be clear, we're voting on it. We're using a 1-2 strategy, so hopefully you get 2 of us. And so, but if you wanted to vote me number 1, I come back to the fact that Te Whanganui Atara, this area, this harbour, welcomed my family when they immigrated from Burma, and it's given me the opportunity to grow up somewhere that's surrounded by nature. It's a compact city. I've gone to university here. I've lived my wildest dreams and jobs I've had where I get to talk on the radio. I've worked in the movies. I've worked in NGOs. I've worked in youth development. But all along that time, I've always had a sense of being involved in social justice and community issues, having a lot of governance and management experience. If I was elected to Greater Wellington Regional Council, I want to accelerate our light rail project, pay our bus drivers a minimum of $30 an hour, and ensure that we can retain and attract a bus workforce by developing a workforce strategy. I want to protect and restore our urban streams, look and support the kaupapa of legal personhood for Kaiwharawhara stream as recommended by Mana Whenua. I want to increase increase funding for community groups that are protecting and planting our urban streams. They're a key part of our flood management protection and also to clean our waterways. And I also want to support the aspirations of Mana Whenua as well.
Okay.
Vote 1 or 2 for me.
Next up, Chris Calvi-Freeman.
I have a special set of skills I've built up over a lifetime. This is me imitating a famous actor. But seriously, this set of skills is useful to Wellington and useful to the Greater Wellington Regional Council. I'm talking about lifetime professional experience in transport planning across modes and across various countries. I want to continue that. We are only scratching the surface of what we can do in the transport sphere. There is much to do with Let's Get Wellington Moving in the medium and longer term, and in the shorter term, there is much to do with keeping our buses reliable and attractive for everyone. There are other issues across the Regional Council gamut that I will be very interested in working on, but I make no apologies for the fact that transport, which accounts for nearly half of the Regional Council's rates take, is my priority and is the area that I think I can bring those skills to bear. In summary, a lifelong professional commitment to better transport and more effective local and regional government. Thank you.
Okay, next up, Thomas Bryan.
And vote for Thomas Bryan, number 1, because I want to have the most livable, accessible, environmentally friendly city in New Zealand. We've done a lot, Greater Wellington's done a lot already to make it heading down that path, but we need to do more. And I see lots of projects, and I'm involved with lots of projects around Let's Get Wellington Moving and the next ticketing project with NZTA. But quite often, we're looking at something that is designed for either people who are always connected, people who are younger, but we're not looking at the whole picture. We're not looking at all of society. And lots of our older people in the community, lots of disabled people aren't always online, aren't as mobile as everybody else. And that's a significant proportion of our community. And we need to do better to make sure that they're included, that they can participate fully, and they too can enjoy the benefits of our region. Thank you.
Okay, next up, Roger.
So a lot of the issues we've heard about tonight have been around public transport, and transport is inextricably linked with climate change, as we've heard too. So we have made huge progress, I think, in the last term in issues like, as we've heard, around electrifying the buses, the electric ferry, the electric bus service to the airport, raising the wages of the bus drivers and so on. But there's still a lot of work still to be done. Like, we have to get the buses into get passed all these cancellations which are disrupting people's travel plans. We have to lock in the electric bus commitments to 2030. So I think we've made huge progress, and I acknowledge my deputy David Lee and Thomas's role as the chair of the Climate Change Commission, Daran's leadership as the chair of the Regional Council. And I'm really putting myself up for your vote because I think there's work still to be finished, and I'm offering to support that.
Okay, next up, Thomas Nash.
Oh, thank you very much. So I'm asking for your 1 and 2 votes for Yadana Saw and me for this election. We're in a climate transition, and we can manage that transition well, or we can manage it less well. I've got a track record of success in organisations in the private sector and in the public sector, governance experience inside and outside council. I've led the climate change work over the last term, and I want to keep doing that. I know that we can achieve a lot more than we've done so far. We've got a lot in the pipeline, so we need to keep those projects like Let's Get Wellington moving on track, and we need to make sure that the work that we're doing to restore our natural environment, to restore the health of our waterways all around the region, in our city and around the region, are progressed with more vigour. I think there's a lot more we can do to work with central government to extract more funding for the important work that we need to do from central government. If we look coordinated and well organised, we will attract more money from government. And that's something that I have a track record of doing and want to continue to do. Thank you.
Okay, and lucky last, Leigh.
You've put me last, Sam.
I did not choose the order. That was the random order system.
And I'm going to ask Wellingtonians to put me first. I think for a start, Wellingtonians, my fellow Wellingtonians, you've got a tough choice here. These people are pretty switched on. There's some really good stuff here. And I think that the incumbents have obviously done pretty hard 3 years, tough stuff. And it must go on. It's got to keep going on, and it's going to get tougher. And they've got to do more. And what Wellington needs is somebody who will ask hard questions, somebody who will say, sorry, that doesn't make sense to me. That's what I do. That's what my job has been for a long time now. I'm a small business owner in Wellington. I travel up and down around this region all the time to my family. I know what it's like to be part of our great city. It's a great city and a great region, and you just need lots of good people to represent you, and I'm one of them.
Okay. Thank you, everyone who has come tonight. Thank you to the candidates for doing it. A special thanks to the incumbents for being here, as we've been having not the best fun having Wellington City Council incumbents appearing on the show. So I'm glad GW has a different train of thought. And what does Peter want to say? Oh,
yeah,
Jay.
that's right.
We're in overtime, just to let you know. Come on, okay.
The question was, what did I get trespassed for at Parliament grounds, and will I get trespassed from Greater Wellington Regional Council? Well, it all depends on whether you vote for me first as to whether I'll get trespassed. But what I did get arrested for, alongside our current Minister of Police and a few other journalists, senior journalists now, and political scientists, I think, is we were protesting the Green Paper on tertiary education, which was moves to further privatise the tertiary education sector. It was quite a different time of how police dealt with protest movements, and we were then arrested and trespassed off Parliament grounds for that. It then created the legal precedent of begs and others, which has been used in case laws ever since, which was that of how trespass orders have to be notified, which is kind of why I think the Parliament protest in March played out the way it did, because they couldn't just blanket trespass everyone. So I'm sorry for that. Didn't know that at the time. Was just trying to keep student fees down. Sorry. I'm still paying off my student loan.
Okay, so thank you for the candidates for being here. You got something to say, Roger?
Well, I was just going to say thank you, and I'm sure the other candidates would join me. And first of all, thanking the organisers, so
Yes.
Stacey and Sam. I think you've done a brilliant job. I must say, it's superbly organised. And a particular thanks to our audience.
Peter and Carol.
We are deeply impressed by your fortitude to stick it out this far. So, and for your very perceptive question at the end, Peter. Thank you.
That's right, and by the sounds of it, I think I'm definitely going to be the nominator for Carol on the Newtown Residents Association. And that's the running gag we've been having for the last couple of years. Now, Meet the Candidates are coming up. We've got our Te Whanganui Atara show tomorrow in the same venue here. So join us at 7 p.m. tomorrow night. If you're waiting for Wednesday, we've got the Kapiti Coast mayoral race. And on Thursday, we've got the Hutt City Council Central Ward show. And on Friday, we've got now, how the hell do you say our Eastern Ward suburb name?
Matukairangi.
Matukairangi, yes. I should have no trouble saying that, but...
Te wiki o te reo Māori.
Yeah, I know. Blame me for that. We've got that on Friday night at the Poneke Rugby Club. Now, something slightly off our script. Our candidates will know this. There is a Meet the Candidates for the Greater Wellington Regional Council tomorrow, run by the Newtown Residents Association at the Salvation Army Hall. And also, if you want to help out, please help out. Rhoda sent an email out looking for help. So doing that as we know the Newtown Residents Association is a cross-posting partner for tonight's show. Oh, and there will be tomorrow for the Te Whanganui Atara show. Stacey will be having the joys of hosting it tomorrow night. And considering, it's someone you can vote for.
I get to vote for them, so I get to question them all.
Yeah, I know. Great idea. A great idea. So yeah, thanks for coming, and we'll see you back here tomorrow at 7 o'clock.